Good morning, everyone. It's just about 11 o'clock. I know we have a lot of people who are still logging in, so we'll kind of do a little slow roll for this part. If you would like to drop your name and where you're from in the chat box, I'd love to get a good representation of where our folks and participants are from. I saw the guest list already, and it looks like we have some friends from Canada and friends from down in the southern United States. So I always like to see where our reach has taken us. So if you don't mind putting yourself in the chat box and where you're from, that would be wonderful. I really appreciate that you are taking the time today to be with us. And during the presentation, we have two different styles of presentation today. The first will come from Department of Ag and Markets from New York State, followed by the iMapInvasives team from the New York Natural Heritage Program. So if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. I and others will be monitoring the chat box, and we will interrupt with questions as they deem appropriate. We will save most of the questions until the end of the presentation, because very often the question that you may have might be identified in the next few slides. So we'll do questions in the chat box. We'll do it after the presentation.
Fuck you, why do you do that?
If you could please mute your line, I'm going to go through and mute everyone once we start the program for sure. And hopefully that will take care of all the background noise. So thank you very much for being here today. Today we have Thom Allgaier, Michael Giambalvo, and Michael Formichelli from the New York State Department of Ag and Markets. Thom is the Invasive Species Coordinator for the New York State Department of Ag and Markets. He serves as the primary contact with the prisms for the department and assists with the spotted lanternfly programs as well as other programs statewide. That'll be then followed by Jennifer Dean, who's the invasive species biologist for the New York Natural Heritage Program and the iMapInvasives database, as well as Mitch O'Neill, who is an end user support specialist with the iMapInvasives New York Natural Heritage Program team. My name is Hillary Mosier. I am speaking from the Finger Lakes Institute in beautiful Geneva, New York, on the campus of Hobart and William Smith Colleges. I am the coordinator for the Finger Lakes PRISM and the Associate Director of Invasive Species Programs here for the Finger Lakes region. The Finger Lakes region of New York is 17 counties, spanning from Rochester down to Alfred, over to Binghamton, up to Syracuse, New York, if you're not familiar. Information about the prisms is available on the fingerlakesinvasives.org website, and I will put that information in the chat box as well. And I also want to invite you to participate in our other webinar series, and I'll put that in the chat box as well. Sounds like my volume is low, so I'll just turn it right over to Thom and I'll stop speaking altogether. How about that?
Thanks, Hillary. I'm Thom Allgaier, Invasive Species Coordinator, New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. And we're here to talk about spotted lanternfly, give a little update, and also describe. We're going to focus mostly on egg mass detection and survey. Spotted lanternfly is the newest of a long string of invaders in New York State. And, we have some microphone issues there. So I'll move to the next slide. We have the list of response partners is long. It's not just us at the Department of Ag and Markets, our partners at DEC, New York State Parks, New York City Parks, State DOT, New York City DOT, the great folks from the IMAP team at the New York Natural Heritage Program, all of the prisms, not just Finger Lakes, and also our counterparts over at USDA Plant Protection Quarantine and New York City DEP as well. And that's not an all-inclusive list. Also, Cornell IPM has been involved with outreach and developing materials as well. So spotted lanternfly, Lycorma deliculata, is a plant hopper native to China. It is not a moth. It is not a butterfly. And it is not a lanternfly. It is a plant hopper. It is not native to North America. So it's native to, as I said, China and Southeast Asia. primarily Vietnam. It was discovered in Pennsylvania in 2014, accidentally by a retired natural resources officer from the state of Pennsylvania. He found something that just didn't fit in right, and it's something unusual that he hadn't seen before, and he reported it, and it ended up being this new invasion, which they didn't expect to survive the winter, and it has, obviously. It uses piercing, sucking mouth parts to feed on sap. It doesn't so much suck the sap as it uses the plant sap pressure to kind of push the sap through the insect. It feeds on about 70 different plant species here in the U.S. One of its preferred hosts is tree of heaven, Alanthus altissima, which is also an invasive species. But the primary concern for us at the department are the grapes, apples, hops, maples, walnuts. Those are some really big agricultural products for New York State. 2 in apple production, and number 3 in grape production. Mike, you want to jump in? Oh no, wait. Yes, Mike, this is you.
Okay. So as you can see on the screen there, the impacts of spotted lanternfly, it stresses plants, it makes them vulnerable to disease and attacks from other insects. For more urbanized areas, the main threat, if you will, is the honeydew. It really kind of makes it unpleasant to be outside where the lanternflies are feeding. It will kind of rain down like you can imagine kind of a syrupy, sticky mess just raining out of the trees. That can, like I said, cause real quality of life issues. It'll be hard for people to use their backyards and things of that nature. There are also the sooty molds that are attracted to that, which can further cause aesthetic damage and just in general make things unpleasant. So that's sort of the main threat there for the urban areas. For farms, and so it goes after grapes and hops primarily, and they can feed on the plants enough where the grapes either don't fully mature or doesn't even fruit out. It's really kind of you can imagine sucking that sap out, really kind of drying those vines out. So it's a real threat to the grape industry as well. That's one of our primary concerns. Okay, you can advance.
Yeah, just
There we go.
the next advance was just the photos. So
Yep. So you can see here pictures of spotted lanternfly feeding on the trees in the upper right-hand corner. You can see them on the deck there, and the bottom step there was power washed, and you can see the color difference from where the spotted lanternflies have rained their honeydew down, the seed mold has gotten in, versus what that's supposed to look like there. Down on the lower side, again, you can see the staining on the leaves there, and around the base of where these insects are present. Okay, we can move on to the next.
So I'll jump back in here. So currently we're at the left side of this life cycle pictogram. Currently, what we'll find in the environment is egg masses. The egg masses are laid in fall into early winter when the adults die off after the first heavy frost. They don't just lay eggs on Alanthus. They will lay eggs on anything that's flat and non-moving. They have a tendency to locate and lay eggs on the underside, kind of protected areas, behind peeling bark, underneath picnic tables, underneath structures, on vehicles, on the underside of vehicles, things like that, anywhere in protected locations. And they also have a tendency, if once one lays an egg, they're kind of attracted to that area. They'll lay eggs. You generally won't see one egg mass. You'll see multiple egg masses in that same area, at least for a heavy infestation. In a light infested area, that might not be the case. A percentage of the egg masses are not covered. So in the photo there on the left, you can see the kind of glossy putty-like protective covering they lay over the eggs. And even that one, the top portion there is not fully covered. The right side of that photo, the little seed-like objects are almost like grains of rice stuck to the tree, or the seeds. So they can look either way, but probably about 40% of them or so roughly will not be covered. But very often you'll have this waxy substance, and I'm reluctant to say gray covering because it changes color. It starts off as a white. We'll cover that a little bit more later. After the eggs hatch in late April, early May, when it starts to warm up, the plants start to grow, and there's a food source. The nymphs emerge from the egg masses. They're black and white. They're very tiny, very, very tiny, like tick-like. They're black and white. They're quite striking looking, quite strike-like looking with their black, bodies and their white spots. But they're very hard to detect in the environment at that first instar, that first stage as a nymph. They'll shed their exoskeleton 3 times, so they'll go through 3 instars, remaining the same colors, and as they get larger. The 4th instar, they develop this red coloring on their wing pads later in the summer, and then as early as July, the adults will, they'll morph one more time and will emerge as an adult. The flat photo that you usually see, kind of like the one on my hat, with the wings spread, is not normally how you'll see it in the environment. This photo here from the lateral view is more likely how you'll see it in the environment, with the red underwings folded back and the semi-translucent forewings kind of folded over them. So it gives them a slight pinkish look, like a pinkish gray. Again, it's a very attractive look, but not when there's thousands of them feeding on your crops and raining down excrement. The one thing that we noticed this year is that the egg masses were starting to appear in September, not October. So they appear a little bit earlier in the season here than they had in Pennsylvania. That's kind of reflected here in this life cycle chart. Again, the 4 life stages that we're considering it. The 4 life stages on the left side, from egg mass to the first 3 instars, the 4th instar, adult. So the egg masses are the primary thing that you're going to find in the environment almost all year, except in the heat of the summer. If you do find an egg mass, it may be an old egg mass that persisted from the year before, but fresh egg masses can be found anywhere from September to June before they start hatching out, late April, early May, when it starts to heat up. It also depends on what part of the state you're in. It's basically when a young flush of growth emerges and there's a food source, that's when the nymphs will emerge. And then they'll move into their, the 4th instar with the red wing pads for a few months. And then the adults will start emerging, around July. So pretty much the entire summer up until the very first, not a frost, but a heavy freeze, a hard freeze. So that right now, the ones that they're adults that they're finding in the southern part of the state, a few of them are still alive, but they're really not moving. We're just basically dying off for the season at this point. Mike, you want to jump in?
Yep. So we're talking about egg masses and so forth. The eggs can be laid not only on trees, but on objects as well, which makes this particularly challenging. The insects seem to like to lay the eggs in sheltered locations, so on the undersides of branches. You can see in the middle here, it's on a railroad, right there on the under part of that I-beam rail there. They've been found on the under parts of wood debris lying on the ground and things like that. So when you're out there scouting, you want to remember to look at objects in the area as well, and kind of try to think of what spaces are sheltered from the weather, and that's where you're going to tend to find the eggs. It's not universally true. There are, especially in areas with higher population, they're going to be on the tree trunks and things like that as well. But when you really want to be thorough when you're out there scouting. Okay. So we have 2 trap methods that we've been using as detection methods. The one on the left is the circle trap. That one is, as you can see, it's kind of like a funneled netting that goes into a plastic bag like that. And the other one is the bug barrier trap on the right-hand side. The structure of that bug barrier trap is the sticky part is on the inside. And you can see that there's a cotton layer underneath it to kind of hold it out from the tree trunk there. So when they're climbing up and down the tree, they're going to encounter this barrier, climb over it, and when they're trying to go back up, they'll get trapped in that area there. And that's kind of it's just a translucent, almost like a translucent flypaper type substance there. This method for the bug barrier trap is good because you're not going to catch inadvertently things you don't want to be catching. Like if the sticky part was on the outside, you'd pretty much catch anything that touched it. That's not really what we're after. So the sticky part's only on the inside of that there. It also, because it's translucent, it's very easy, very quick to check. You can kind of walk up to it and just sort of walk around it, looking inside and see if you have any lanternflies or not. We tend to use the bug barrier traps in areas that are more public because they're very simple. There's no insecticides or anything like that. So it's better for that purpose. The circle trap, the use for that is not just detection, but because you can collect individuals as they climb into that, we use it to sort of get an idea of what the population in an area might be, depending on how much that bag fills up. And in areas where the population is very high, that bag actually can fill up in a week or two, almost completely. And in lower population areas, you're only going to get a handful of them in there. Okay. So focusing on the eggs again, you can see there's an egg mass there on that tree trunk. Do we have the highlight part of this slide, Tom? Right there. So that's the egg mass there. You can see it does blend in a fair amount. I was actually sort of the difference between the literature and the pictures I was seeing from when I went into the field and was able to see it. Like the pictures are somewhat deceptive about how easy it is to spot these things. They're actually pretty hard, particularly on cloudier days. They really blend in very well. Also, particularly as they age, they're going to be slowly shifting in color, and they're going to resemble bark more and more. So when you're out there looking, again, be thorough, look very carefully. Okay.
Mike, there's a question about how big in the fields in New York State have the egg masses been? Size-wise?
How big are the egg masses, did you say?
Yeah, right. So how long would they be?
So you can see on the left-hand side here, you can see sort of that egg mass on the bottom compared to a thumb.
Positively charged.
However, there is some variance in the size. So they can be a little bigger than that, a little smaller than that. So far, in my experience, go ahead, Tom.
About a half-inch wide, half-inch to 3/4 of an inch wide to about 1.5 inches long. Very similar in size and shape to gypsy moth egg masses, if anyone's familiar with those. So very, very similar in dimensions.
Great, thank you. That was just a relevant question that I wanted to jump in.
Yep, no problem. So the egg masses, like I've been talking about, they get laid in sheltered areas, and in certain areas we have found them under the bark where there's been a crack in the bark or some damage there. It looks like the lanternflies are able to crawl up underneath it and start laying the egg masses. So that's yet another challenge in detecting them. Like you can see, the bark on the left-hand side has been peeled off, so you can see where that is. And on the right-hand side, the lighter colored egg mass is the fresher one, and to the left of that, there's another one there, kind of just to the sort of center left of the photo, that's starting to blend in with the bark around it. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So here's more examples. You can see where there's been a wound in the tree on the left-hand side. The tree is closing that wound up, but it has made an opportunity for a sheltered area for that egg mass. So you can see it there on the left. And again, on the right-hand side there, you can see it sort of zoom in of what that could look like. Okay, next slide. So here are more eggs. There, I'm just going to take a moment here to mention this. So there is a host list for spotted lanternfly. Atlantis, of course, is at the top of that host list. That is definitely true. There's nothing wrong with that host list per se. What we have been finding is, again, these insects lay their eggs on anything. So when we're out in the field, we've started finding egg masses on trees that are not considered hosts for the lanternfly. So that's something to keep in mind as well as you're going around, that you really want to look at everything while you're out there. If the females happen to land on something and just start laying eggs, they kind of don't care if we have a host list. Is one way to look at it. Next slide. Okay, so you can see the comparison of the covered egg mass, the uncovered egg mass, and the adult there. You just kind of see relative sizes, and again, the adults are, what is it, Tom, 1 inch to 1.5 inches? Thereabouts?
The adults, three-quarters of an inch to 1 inch.
Thank you. Yep. Yeah, I forgot the exact number, but yeah, they're pretty big. But the other interesting thing I found from the field is that they do tend to blend in. Like, you wouldn't expect it, because again, when you're looking at the pictures, like, oh, look at that, it's spotted. When the wings are out, it's brightly colored. But as Tom mentioned earlier, most of the time they don't have their wings spread, and that the outer part of the wings there are kind of dull, as you can see. And when particularly if it's not in good lighting, it can be easy to miss them. What I found though is when the adults are out, again, not this time of year, they're starting to die off now. You may find 1 or 2, but more like the earlier part of the fall. If you're in an area that's infested and you're standing around the trees, you need to give your eyes like a minute or 2 to start picking them out. So the other thing about this survey is it's not a quick one. You have to really take your time to start spotting things. And the same is true of the egg masses as well. Okay. So again, we keep mentioning this, they lay their eggs on anything. So you can see on the right-hand side there, there's a old tire. It's rusty. You can see all the egg masses there on them. We've highlighted them for you in this picture. Again, on the left-hand side, sort of the typical egg masses there. This actually, I think, Tom, you're going to talk about this shortly, but this is actually part of the challenge too, because those egg masses get laid on anything. If there's a vehicle parked under a tree, or in an area where they're laying eggs, they can put the eggs on the vehicle and the wheel wells. And again, they're going to be going for sheltered areas. It's not going to be on the roof. More likely than not, it's going to be on an underside of something. And unfortunately, that means that the egg masses can move around, and the adults laying them can wind up in a wheel well or something like that and move around as well. So hopefully I haven't stolen your thunder, Tom.
No, not at all. So no.
All right.
One thing I would add is the center photo there with the close up. You can see the individual eggs laid in a kind of very linear fashion. They're always going to be in little rows like that, and also they're kind of seed-like. They're in there. It looks almost to me like caraway seeds. But the important thing here is the covering, how it weathers and cracks, and it very, you can see the egg mass photo on the left photo compared to the one in the center. The coloring and the texture is very variable. So it's always it's this color or it's this texture. It definitely changes as it weathers and as it ages.
Okay.
We're
Next
good?
slide. Yep, we're good. So again, you are seeing egg masses now on an old, I think it's a 50-gallon drum there. Again, the strategy for the spotted lanternfly is to lay it in an area that's protected. So you can see that first ring up by the top, you can see egg masses just underneath it. And on the bottom, you can see where it's much more obvious where there's been lots laid there. And here these are being highlighted for you now. I know there is one sort of in the non-protected area in the middle there, but the vast majority are going to be in those sheltered areas.
And again, they have this attraction for rusty metal for some reason.
Yeah.
There's a tree right here next to it, not an egg mass on the tree, but the barrel is covered.
Yeah, that was actually a question in the chat, is that anecdotally it's been heard that they like rusty items, especially. So it seems like there's truth to that rumor.
It seems to be, yes. And then here's another good shot of egg masses on rusty metal. So I'll jump in here.
Nothing rusts in New York.
Yeah, we don't have road salt or anything like that.
We don't have any rusts ever.
No. One of our big concerns is unintended transport. People parking vehicles, whether they're RVs or trailers or boat trailers, snowmobiles that are been sitting in someone's yard, and they bring it up to their cabin and they leave it there, and unintentionally on the underside, like the back of this tractor trailer here, you can see these egg masses around this light housing and the tailgate of this truck. You don't see anything up on the top up here, but these protected areas of this rusty metal, they've kind of laid a grouping of egg masses there. Also here in this photo, there is a adult in that grill right there that our inspector Jamie Lynn Woodside spotted during a roadside checkpoint. So that squished, dead, and spotted lanternfly would certainly tickle the noses of the detector dogs. They're better at spotting these than we are. They have found them in the kind of the inner cowl of the air intakes on some trucks where we could not see them. I mean, this one's very difficult to see, and one of our inspectors did see it. But if that insect was in there, crawled in there, and was alive and wasn't struck while it was driving, if that adult crawled in there while it was alive, it could very well, hitchhike in that protected area until it got to its cargo's destination, or if it was someone's personal vehicle, to their cabin, to their hunting site, grandma's house, wherever they were going from the quarantine area, the known infested areas throughout the country, in the Northeast, it's anywhere in New York. So this unintended transport is really what we're concerned with. Permitting is required to bring cargo and pretty much any items from the quarantine areas into New York State. The permits are free. The important part of the permit is the pre-trip check. There's an inspection that's done every single time a vehicle comes from the quarantine into New York, or even stops them. If they're driving through a quarantine and they pick up something, that would also trigger the need for the permit. A little bit more on that later. Also, when they don't really swarm, but they do have mass hatchings, and there are hundreds, as you can see here with this fourth instar nymphs on this tire of this vehicle. If this vehicle was on a trailer, they could easily shelter in place and be transported. So you wouldn't just be transporting a single insect; it would be hundreds or thousands of them accidentally being transported. And I wouldn't be surprised if some piece of metal like this was rusty on the backside and there were egg masses somewhere. But here, there look like fourth instar nymphs. That vehicle on a trailer could easily transport a new population, to a new area. When the adults are out, the nymphs are a little less nimble, and they don't move quite as much. They can crawl, they can hop, but the adults can also fly. And they can fly short distances, but so they just have three modes of transport: hopping, walking, and flying. They'll fly if they have to. Their preference is to walk, and if they get disturbed, they will hop. Here you can see on the door pillar of this pickup truck, in this vehicle, and this is the sort of thing that we fear. Someone parks their vehicle in a parking lot or at someone's house, a gas station or whatever, and you open the door to get in, and this little guy climbs inside, and you have a hitchhiker. It's very, very, even our inspectors, when they went to Pennsylvania, they did checks. They checked themselves over. They got in the vehicle and they found one on the seat when they went to get out. Recently, I heard a story of of someone else that was aware of spotted lanternfly, and they were hiking in an area. They checked themselves. They got home. When they got home, they found a dead one on the floor that had apparently been in the cleats of their boots. So boot brush stations are not just good for seeds, but accidental hitchhikers like these. The known areas that we have now, this is the most up-to-date map that we have. So the blue areas are confirmed populations that we know of infestations. You can see red dots scattered throughout New York State. Those are areas where we have found, single insects, dead insects, eggs on a nursery pot during an inspection. Mike and his supervisor were present doing a follow-up inspection at a nursery when a truck delivered a load of nursery stock, and there were spotted lanternfly on the nursery stock, which had been treated. So they were following the protocol, but we counted that as they were accidentally transported to New York. We did count that. But you can see now that there's a population in Ohio and West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey. Of course, Pennsylvania, where it was first introduced in Berks County, it's kind of spread from the central point there. Also, Staten Island is now kind of highlighted in blue between New Jersey and Long Island. We're still trying to delimitate the infestations that we know of in New York. The small infestation, very small infestation near Ithaca, and also Port Jarvis, Orangeburg, and Port Jarvis, Orangeburg, and Sloatsburg. So the quarantine areas I discussed earlier are these blue areas. So New York State has an external quarantine, so which restricts items. The blue areas that are outlined in red, at least. The other areas are new in the extra counties there in Virginia. Also, this county in Delaware, this central county here, and then also in Ohio and Connecticut as well. Those will be added to the external quarantine as time allows. But anything coming from those areas needs to be permitted by those states to come to New York. We'll accept the Pennsylvania permit. We'll accept any of the permits. We prefer the one from Pennsylvania. It's a free 2-hour course. It's kind of the gold standard for the permits. But we're just trying to restrict accidental transport by getting people to do these inspections. As I mentioned, the quarantine area really doesn't apply to anyone in the Finger Lakes that's going to be out doing survey. However, if you are going to an event in another state, I know COVID's got interstate travel kind of reduced quite a bit, but there is still some commerce and some leisure time travel between states that would be affected by these quarantines. So the quarantine is still in place, the external quarantine. And basically any living stage of the spotted lanternfly, anything that could possibly harbor or likely to harbor any of the living life stages are considered regulated articles. So we have the pre-trip inspection, and then it's accompanied by the way bill. So we know, like a commercial transportation, we know where the item's coming from and where it's going to, so we can backtrack and inspect those warehouses as well. Mike, you want to jump back in?
Yep. Okay, so we're just going to go through a couple of maps here. You can see on this one, these are the trap positives. The ones at the very bottom, that the points are kind of stacked on each other because of the level of zoom here. That's Staten Island. I think we have a more of a zoom in later.
Yes.
There you can see we had a positive trap in Rockland County and in Orange County as well. There, we can go to the next one.
So,
Get more detail.
I just wanted to stress the important thing is that besides visual survey, that the trap and lure combination is actually working.
Oh, yeah. It does work, yes.
Yes, we were unsure of a trapping method. It was kind of untested, but the traps are definitely working.
So this is the zoom in on Staten Island. You can see we had the positive traps towards the bottom. Those 4 points are the original detections. They're in various parks, essentially. And that on Staten Island, that is where we believe the highest population of them is. Or you can see we did have a positive detection towards the north side of the island, and survey has detected spotted lanternfly throughout Staten Island, really. That continue. Okay, this is the Port Jervis. So what you're seeing now, that box is we have a grid survey that we're running, and so essentially we've divided the map up into these numbered grids so we know which ones we've done and which haven't been checked yet and things like that. When you see a red box like that on a map, it means we had a detection in that grid. That detection could be, a survey detection where one of our surveyors actually was able to obtain a sample and send it in and get it identified. Sometimes those, as you'll see soon, are detections by the public where they've managed to get a sample for us, or they've sent a really clear picture in for us and we've sent an inspector out to verify it. So that's what those red boxes are going to be in the coming maps there. This is again, the Port Jervis area. We had a detection there along the I-84 corridor. It's not a huge surprise since that is a big trucking route, but it is unfortunate that we were able to detect in that area. I mean, no, it's not unfortunate that we were able to detect it. It's unfortunate that it's there. Next slide, please. So this is the Sloatsburg area of Rockland County, where we had another detection. And that area right there is right around the Sloatsburg I-87 corridor rest stop, and not a huge surprise considering that it is a truck route, and that is a spot where trucks do stop for the night and so forth, giving the insects opportunity to jump off the trucks and go after the trees. Okay, next slide. And here's the New York City area, again, Staten Island. We had detections throughout Staten Island where we have adults and things of that nature. The detections in the rest of the city and actually heading on to Long Island a little bit there in Nassau. I'll just take you through them. The Nassau County detection was a detection by the public. The Bronx detection was a detection by the public, and we only had the one sample. When we surveyed the areas around that, we didn't find anything. So those are what we call one-offs. So it looks like it was a hitchhiker or something of that nature, but there was no, established colony found. Same thing actually in Queens and Brooklyn. We're finding a lot of these one-offs, and Manhattan, where there's an adult, but there appear to be no egg masses and things of that nature. We are going to go back and resurvey these areas probably in next spring, just to kind of make sure that was actually the case, that it's a one-off and it didn't start, to establish there. However, it is unfortunately established on Staten Island. Okay. Okay. So this is how to report spotted lanternfly if you find it. We have an email there. Please send a picture in with it if you can. If you can obtain a sample, it's collected an insect, or this time of year it's probably going to be an egg mass. You can do that. That's also welcome. If you actually for scouting, if you're out seeing egg masses on trees, please take a picture and actually leave them there for now. Report it in, and we'll come out to verify. The reason why we want you to leave it up is because right now they're not going anywhere. It's not hatching time yet. We have months yet before that happens. And you may have stumbled across a really good training site, where we can bring more people in, train them to spot them and things like that. So we ask that you do leave them up until we're able to verify the find and kind of determine if it's a place that we can use for training or, to get more pictures to make more slides and things like that. Okay.
Well, one thing I want to point out on this photo is this is one of the first instar imps. These are what it's perched on are spruce tree needles. So if you can picture a spruce tree and how small the needles are, and it's perched on the tip of one of those needles. That's how tiny they are when they first hatch. So roughly the size of the O in this word photo. They're probably about the size of the center part of the photo. So they're really tiny. So, other questions? Mike,
Yeah.
Mike,
I think
try to
I
answer
saw a
them.
bunch in the chat.
Yeah,
Right.
there are
I
a
saw
lot of
someone. Oh yeah, there we go. Thank you, Jamie Lynn. So I saw one that asked how big the grids were, and Jamie Lynn answered it in the chat. It's a square kilometer. Thank you.
Jamie Lynn is one of our horticulture inspectors. She was the one that found the insect in the grill of that vehicle.
Yep.
So I'll start
Um,
with the questions from the beginning. The first question that came up was, what are some safe ways to eradicate these invasive insects?
Safe ways to eradicate.
Well, the egg masses can be crushed, squished, and smashed. That's pretty safe.
Okay, the next question is, with the new growing style apple production, has there been any study on those the impacts to trees, specifically apple?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Mike Giambalvo, do you know? Michael? Have you heard anything in that realm?
No, I have not.
Okay, so maybe that's something that we can investigate moving forward. Another question was, once they're identified in a locale, is it inevitable that the infestation will occur? And I'm assuming egg masses depict an infestation.
No, I think especially like in the small Ithaca infestation, I believe there were 11 adults and 21 egg masses identified. So it's not a very large infestation. So we still have hopes to eradicate it from that location. We hope to eradicate it from New York, but small infestations like in Ithaca, as long as we don't find more satellite locations, we have a very good chance of eliminating from those small populations. We're still
early detection is key. Like if we catch it early enough, if the public reports it early enough, if you guys find it early enough, there's a chance that we can do an eradication. The longer it goes unreported, the bigger that potential infestation is going to get, the harder it's going to be to take care of.
So if you were to recommend for community or citizens at large to choose an area that they can kind of search, what would be some of the more important locations for them to keep their eyes open?
Their backyard.
Their backyard, okay.
Yeah, they're going to be most familiar with what's normal in their backyard, so they're going to be kind of clue in on things that are not normal, things that they haven't seen before. We wouldn't want to direct people to a specific location because maybe we've surveyed that area already, and it would be kind of duplicating efforts. I'm working. That's why Jen is here for the second part. We're working with to be able to assign survey grids within IMAP, so that citizen scientists, especially PRISM partners, can go out and survey in a coordinated effort. So we're not creating gaps and overlap, that we're not tripping over each other, that we're not accidentally removing, training egg masses that we're planning on using, things like that. So I would stick to the backyards, and also once we get this coordination set up, probably be early January, February, probably February, I think. Jen will have more on that later, but the coordinated effort between us and trying to use IMAP, not just for reporting, but for directed survey. We're going to rely on that.
Great.
And I'm going to add just quick to that for the general public. check your vehicle. When you get home, look the vehicle over, check your wheel wells. If you can look under it a little bit, that's great. If you have a tree next to your driveway, check the tree. That things of that nature, like little simple things that hopefully people can make a little bit of a habit of when they go driving around. It will help enormously. Also, if the vehicle is parked in a garage, have a look around your garage. If you had a hitchhiker, when in the season when the adults are out, it could be that you park your car inside your garage, and then the insect moves off the car in search of a sheltered area. So underneath any benches or anything like that you might have in the garage as well.
Great. The next question is, the management strategy recommended by Penn State Extension is to remove 90% of tree of heaven, focusing on the female trees, and applying a systemic insecticide on the remaining 10% of the trees. Can you speak to how such a resource-intensive strategy would be able to be rolled out?
On a limited basis, we do plan on removing some of the trees that have egg masses. It's all based on resources and our ability to put those resources to bear. There is a plan on using chemical treatments. There's also been some research that not completely removing trees, but cutting them back, causing them to have a spring flush of new growth, timed with the emergence of the first and second instars. They're kind of attracted to that new growth. It's very tender, so they can feed on it with their tiny mouth parts. And we can kind of target those, kind of sort of use those as sort of trap trees. That's another strategy that's being developed, slightly different than what Penn State is using.
Great. Question about the bug barrier. What's the field life for something like that? How often would it have to be replaced?
That's a good question. So we put them up for several months at a time, actually, and they just keep on ticking. So I actually don't have an end number of when it would kind of start running out of its usefulness. I imagine it might depend on what kind of weather you're getting throughout the season, but the ones we've used so far have lasted for months on end.
Locations too. If it's near a roadway where it's going to get a lot of road debris and road salts and things like that that might accumulate on it, it might gum up cover the sticky surface versus a more protected environment. They're going to last longer because they're not having that environmental impact.
Great. And what type of lure do you use on those?
So for the actually kind of thing for both of the types of traps that we featured in the presentation today, it's just a kind of a generic insect lure. It's very similar to smells like menthol. It's very similar to the smell you get from like an icy hot, something you might buy at the drugstore, something like that. I think actually, Tom, do you know the exact?
It's a plant pheromone attractant. It's kind of a broad based. I can't think of the actual chemical compound, but it's a plant pheromone. It's a broad based insect attractant, particularly for plants that feed on woody plants.
Great. We just have a few more questions here. I'll try to do those quickly. So, one of our friends is from Canada. So would you suggest sending any reports to the CFIA?
If they find them in Canada, yes, they should report them in Canada. If they find them in Pennsylvania, they should report them in Pennsylvania. The reporting SLF reporting address there on the bottom is if you find it in New York State. If you find it, wherever you find it, if they are finding it in Canada, certainly don't report it to us. Report it to CDFIA.
Great. So are you using the traps to assess the population, or are you using the traps to help eradicate the insects? Or both?
Well, not necessarily. Well, the bag traps can be used in an eradication effort, but it's more of a detection tool.
Yeah. Great. And so we know that Penn State has developed a bioinsecticide. are there plans to use it in New York?
I believe that they're talking about Bavaria. It's been commercially available for years. The problem is it's not registered for New York. What Penn State and others, and I believe Rutgers is also doing the same thing as Cornell. They're trying to do research on not only the timing of the applications, but the rates, so that we can get it labeled for use in New York. But
Great.
Bavaria is not, it's been developed into a biopesticide, but it's not registered in New York yet. Not for spotted lanternfly.
Okay. Are there any natural predators of the spotted lanternfly?
None that we've come across. I mean, the occasional mantid or bird has been seen feeding on them, but it's shown to be there hasn't been any positive results in that I'm aware of. Mike Giambalvo, do you know of any other research, more recent, of any pests other than the bacteria, the Bavaria?
I think we know of some fungal parasitoids and some wasp parasitoids that can kill a small percentage of SLF populations. That's correct, right?
Yeah, I forgot about the wasps. So but there's Bavaria, and then very major, and then there's another naturally occurring fungal pathogen in the U.S. that have been shown to attack them. The other pathogen has not been developed into a biopesticide, so that the curve on that is much steeper and much longer. So they're kind of going with the one that already exists. But there have been some research done on wasp parasitoids for the parasitoid. They go to the eggs. So.
Great. And last question, does the spotted lanternfly actually kill the plants it's feeding on, or is the issue just the honeydew and smut issues?
Yes, all the in Pennsylvania, they have been known to kill grapevines.
Great. I believe that we've covered all of the questions in the chat or through the presentation. They were answered in regards to egg masses. Will you be sending me this presentation so I can upload it to our website for people to refer back to?
I will have to get permission to share the maps, but it shouldn't be a problem. But yes, if I get permission to release the maps, yes.
Great. And this is being recorded and will be available on the website as well. Finger Lakes Invasives. I'll put the link in the chat box. Thom, Michael, and Michael, we appreciate your sharing your information about the spotted lanternfly with us today. It's obviously a very concerning issue for us in the Finger Lakes, but in New York State, in the country as a whole. So we really want to nip this in the bud and try to get as many people with eyes on the ground to report this. And we appreciate your efforts, all that you guys are doing to address this issue.
Same here with the PRISM. Thank you for the opportunity for the outreach and for all the efforts of all your partners.
Yeah, we've got the best partners in the region, that's for sure. So at this point, we'll hand it over to the iMapInvasives team and the New York Natural Heritage, who is going to talk about how to map these, utilizing some of the strategies that Thom and Mike have referred to in the previous presentation. We're going to talk about Tree of Heaven and how to map things. So I will hand it over to Jen and Mitch and stop my video.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Hillary. Hi, I'm Jennifer Dean. I'm with the New York Natural Heritage Program, and I'm the invasive species biologist there. So we're going to talk about reporting to iMapInvasives, which is the New York State Invasive Species Database, as another way for the public to report spotted lanternfly and get that information to ag markets and the stakeholders who need that information. And so just a quick background on the New York Natural Heritage Program. We are a partnership between the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. And our mission is to facilitate the conservation of New York's biodiversity. And this is by providing information and expertise on rare species and natural ecosystems, and also those associated threats to those species and ecosystems. And so the invasive species database program has been a big component of the Natural Heritage Program for well over 10 years now. We have the iMapInvasives database, which I'll go into in more detail, and my colleague Mitch O'Neill will walk you through the mobile application. But we also have other apps and spatial models, such as the Watercraft Inspection Steward Program application for those boat launch stewards to collect valuable information, and these spatial prioritization models by combining large amounts of locational and attribute data so that we can help managers, best prioritize where to be looking for invasive species. And so iMapInvasives is our centralized database here in New York State to help support the PRISMs and the state agencies and other partners and the public working on invasive species issues. And for those of you not familiar with the system, this provides a way to, of course, input and report information on invasive species, but also provide species distribution maps and reports, early detection alerts, so you can sign up for emails that will trigger based on the criteria that you set up. The way that the system is built, there are web map services so that you can ingest the live stream of the data into your own platform, whether it's like a website or your own ArcGIS system. And of course, tracking control efforts and results. So, people are out there making a lot of progress on invasive species issues, and this is a way that they can document those efforts in a standardized way and share it with other partners. And so we aggregate information from a lot of different sources, working very closely with our local, state, and federal agency partners who are doing invasive species work across the state, land and water managers, researchers. We also, try to gather as much museum data as we can for like a historical context on when certain invasive species have been detected. And, just as importantly as the data entered by the public, by our community scientists, we call them, and our professionals. And so this information that's being entered as you see it is hugely important. I think Michael mentioned that, a lot of those reports that were like in the Manhattan area and Long Island, like those were coming from the public. And so it's those eyes on the ground that are really important because, the professionals can't be everywhere at once. Like we need your help and looking, recognizing these species and knowing how to report them. And so as information is entered into the database, those reports are reviewed and confirmed by the taxonomic experts for those species. And so that information can then, once it's confirmed, can then be shared more widely. And so coming down to a more technical level real quickly, before I'm going to give you a demo of the online system, I just like to point out that we do have these different worlds in a sense. On the tech side, we have the mobile applications, which are a way to collect data when you're out in the field, whether or not you have cell service. You can, take photos, it gets your GPS coordinates, gets all that information ready for a report. And then once you're back online, you can upload those to the database and view and search and also report things on the online web application. So the web browser is really where all the power of iMapInvasives is. Of course you have to have connectivity for that, but you can also view it on the web browser on your smartphone or of course on your desktop, which gives you a little more screen space. But that's where you can do a lot of mapping activities with the data that we have. And we have about 250,000 observation records for invasive species just in New York State alone. And not to mention, thousands of treatment records and not detected records and so forth. The browsers that this application works best on are Google Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. So at this point, I'm going to jump over to the actual website itself. And so you can actually sign up for an account, and hopefully all of you were able to sign up for an account ahead of time. If not, no worries, you can go to our website and we can put that website in the chat box. so that you can see it, so that you can create an account. If you already have an iMapInvasives account, you can, of course, log in with your username and password. Your username is always the email address that you're associated with. And just one thing to note, I know there's a lot of people on this webinar, which is awesome. There's probably a lot of you who might have had iMapInvasives account years ago, but just haven't had an opportunity to log in. We did redesign the whole system last year. And if you have had an account previously, but you have not logged into this new system, your account still rolled over with all the data associated. You just need to make sure that you reset it first with your forgot password. So using your email address you used before. And of course, you can always email us. There's real people behind the database if you get stuck or you can't remember what account you used to have. So instead of creating a new account, you can always reactivate your old account. All right, so you need to log in. And then once you log in, you get to the online map. And this has all the information that you need that's in iMapInvasives. You can scroll on the map itself, and you can look at some of the different tools that we have. So here on the left-hand side, we have our map navigation tools. You can zoom in and zoom out on the map, and of course, search for locations. Across the top, you have these action tools. So you can create records right here on the web browser itself. Like you can create a presence record and upload photos and the coordinates, or just click on the map. I'm not going to go through that component because Mitch will be showing you how to do that on the mobile application. But you can also filter records. And then on this right-hand side here, you can change all of the base layers and add on other additional map layers. So you can say go to satellite imagery or topo layers. So there's a lot of different options you have here. You can also, if you have a public web map service that you want to add into this map, you can overlay your own GIS layers into the system here. You can create distribution layers, say by county or watershed and so forth. And then of course, turn off and on the different types of data that we have in there. So a lot of power at your fingertips. Here I'm going to actually show you how to use the filter. So I'm going to filter for Tree of Heaven, because that is one of those favorite host trees of spotted lanternfly. So if I apply that filter, you have to give it a little bit of time to spin since there is a lot of data in there. But you can see that these hexagons are showing you the generalized locations of all those observations we have based on the number of observations. And then of course you can zoom in to a particular spot. Here I'll go down to Albany area. And as you zoom in, those hexagons become more specific points. And so once that spins, you'll see the green points that are associated with those hexagons. Any moment now. All right, well, while I'm waiting for that to go in, here we go. Okay, so turns to these green points. So these are just showing the Tree of Heaven records. You can also turn off and on like the unconfirmed records. But if I click on any of these clusters, I can get the actual records themselves. So I can open up an individual presence record. So here I have one for Tree of Heaven here in the Albany area. You can see the photo that's associated with it and then zoom in and out. So good photos is definitely key so that we can identify things. And you can also get the information, I'm sorry, here we go, additional information that user might have submitted on that record. All right. And so one other thing that I want to do next is actually show you what happens when we search for spotted lanternfly. So one thing to note with spotted lanternfly is that for most of you who are searching on the map itself, you have to give it a moment to spin here. you'll notice that once that spotted, or once the tree of heaven data disappears, there's actually no data that we have visible for spotted lanternfly to the public in iMapInvasives. And this is because this species is set as a confidential species, which means that once data is entered, it becomes hidden from the public view. Only key state agency staff like ag market staff and the PRISM leaders can see that data. So this feature was built into iMapInvasives for those few special species like spotted lanternfly, Asian longhorn beetle, and so forth, that invoke a strong regulatory response once it's discovered. And these species, of course, could also have negative repercussions economically if, say, inaccurate data is publicly shared. So for example, if a misidentified report is entered into iMapInvasives for a certain new agricultural pest and then shared as though it was real, and we all know how quickly misinformation can spread these days, then farmers in that county may face real economic losses unnecessarily. So we want to take the spotted lanternfly data very seriously. The staff at ag markets have email alerts to notify them as new reports come into iMapInvasives, and then they know to log in and review those photos and the information that's entered. And then typically they'll reach out to that observer to get more information and so forth. Of course, once again, stressing that good photos are very important. We are also bringing in information from iNaturalist. So this is a very showy insect. People are taking photos of it as they find it. And iNaturalist is another platform where the general public might be entering information about spotted lanternfly, whether or not they even know that it's an invasive species. And so we've set up some scripts that automatically consume that data that gets entered into iNaturalist to funnel it through iMapInvasives so that ag and market staff and other agency staff can see those public reports coming through and then add them to their own database system so that they know how to best strategically, plan their surveys. All right, and then a couple of other things that I want to show you on the map here, or on the iMap system itself. If you click on this little logo icon in the upper left-hand corner, this is your menu, and there's a lot of great things that you can check out there. But I do encourage everyone to go to your account once you log in. And so this will take you to your own account settings. You can, I do encourage you to check your primary organization. If you are collecting information for your work, essentially, you do want to make sure that your organization is populated correctly. If you're doing this as a volunteer, you don't have to worry about that. But it is good to let people know. If you don't have a primary organization that should be there, you can use this edit tool in the upper right-hand corner. And then if you scroll down, you can go to organization, you can request to join an organization. And then once you do that, the organizational admin or administrator will review your request and then, accept you into that organization so that then the data that you collect can be reflected for your organization. And then another feature that I wanted to point out are the email alerts that we have here. There are a couple of automatic email alerts that are set up when you join, but you can add custom email alerts. Once again, in that upper right-hand corner, there's an edit and you can add an alert. And this gives you the ability to set very customizable email alerts, for just about any combination of species and geography that you can think of. And so these are very handy, especially if you're managing certain parks or counties and so forth. But just note that because spotted lanternfly is set up as a confidential species within iMapInvasives, you will not receive email alerts on that species unless you have the confidential viewing permissions set up within that system. But it's great for general invasive species information. All right, and so with that, if you have questions about iMapInvasives online, please put those into the chat box and we'll address them after Mitch is done with his presentation. But for right now, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint for a moment before I turn it over to Mitch and speak a little bit more about what Thom had started to mention about a volunteer grid survey project that we're working on. And so we're collaborating with ag markets and the PRISMs to develop a spotted lanternfly survey grid specifically for volunteers and PRISM partners to help strategically direct all that early detection effort. And so coming this February, there will be an online map where you can sign up for grid squares to survey in public areas. AgriMarkets will be color coding the grid squares based on needs for volunteers in certain locations. Then you can report your survey efforts, whether you find spotted lanternfly or hopefully you do not find spotted lanternfly, so you can report that not detected effort as well to iMapInvasives, and that if you do find it, also report to the spotted lanternfly email address for AgriMarkets. To make sure that you hear about the training that's going to be coming up in February for this specific effort, please watch for announcements. This will be announced on the PRISM email list. So if you're in the Finger Lakes and you're not on the Finger Lakes PRISM email list yet, definitely get on it. There's a lot of great information that goes out on that. You can follow the New York iMapInvasives on Facebook. And you can also email us at imapinvasives@dec.ny.gov and put SLF survey in the subject line, and we'll make sure that you get the email announcement when it goes out if you don't have any of these other mechanisms set up. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to Mitch O'Neill. And Mitch, I'll advance your slides for you, and then when you're ready, you can share your screen to show the mobile app.
Sounds great, thank you. So I'm Mitch O'Neill. Thanks for joining us today. I'm the end user support specialist for the iMapInvasives team. And so Jen just gave a great introduction to the online web application. And if you press next slide, Jen. Thank you. We'll now switch into the mobile app, which is a tool we've developed to be kind of a faster, easy tool to upload records, even when you're not in connectivity and can't use the website. So you can find the mobile app in your app store if you're an iPhone user, or on the Google Play Store if you use Android, and just search iMapInvasives. And I'm gonna ask anyone who's interested to follow along, and we can all submit a fake species record to make sure the app's working and see how it works. Next slide. And just to frame it a little bit before we dive in, I think of the workflow as a sandwich. So first, you need connectivity. So you need to be at home with internet to download the app and set your preferences and everything. After that, you are free to go out into the world and record Tree of Heaven, spotted lanternfly, even when you're out in the wilderness and don't have internet connectivity or good cell service or anything. But then those records will be stored on your phone with the photos and the GPS coordinates and everything, but they'll be just on your phone. So the final step, the bottom slice of bread, you have to get back into connectivity. So once you're back home, you can upload those records to the online database so that they can be viewed by natural resource professionals, citizen scientists, ag and markets in the case of spotted lanternfly. We really want these records to get up into the online database so that they can be used. Next slide. And one more thing I want to mention before we dive in are the importance of good photos. So the mobile app allows you to take a picture while you're recording the record. And these pictures are super, super important because this is how experts can go in, look at the record, and determine whether or not it's a genuine identification of that species or not. So an example on the left side, I took a picture of Tree of Heaven and I blurred it to kind of showed you what we would be dealing with if there was a blurry picture of Tree of Heaven. So in that picture, an expert might be able to tell, but they'll kind of have to squint at it for a while because when it's blurry like this, it's pretty hard to distinguish from lookalikes like sumac. And then on the right, I have some pictures of the egg coverings. And so on the right-hand side, that picture is nice because you can see some of the reporter's hands, so you have some sense of scale. And the picture in the middle, that one's really useful because it's just such high resolution and it's focused and close up. So you really get a good visual of these coverings so that someone looking at it can have a good idea whether or not this is a spotted lanternfly, a sign of spotted lanternfly or not. One tip we have also is you could put a sheet of paper behind if you're taking a picture of a plant, because that'll help provide scale and focus. Hands can help for that as well. Next slide. And so now I'll do a quick live demo. So I'll go through 3 things. The first one will be setting the preferences, then recording an observation, and then uploading it. So kind of the 3 steps in the sandwich. And so anyone who has not downloaded the app, you can do that from your app store by searching iMapInvasives. And you'll also need to make sure you have your IMAP account set up online, like Jen said before. And one thing I'll reiterate is if you're on that login portal or the sign up portal, after you sign up, you'll get a message saying that you'll get an email. So make sure you go into your email account and look for an email for iMapInvasives. And if nothing's there, you might want to check your junk mail or your spam to see if anything showed up there. It's just a link to the IMAP user agreement so that you can click on it, agree to it, and then activate your account. So now I will switch to my screen. So I hope you can see my screen, but so when you download the app, it'll appear on your phone with that same icon as you see on the online website, so the leaf. So you click on that IMAP app. And if you are opening this up for the first time, it might bring you to the preferences directly. So if it looks different, just wait for a second. So if this is not your first time, it might look like this. So it'll show some instructions. Once you read where everything is on the site, you can tap those away. And then you're brought to this main screen or this blank green screen. So the first thing you need to do to set up the app is to go into your preferences. So on the top left, there's a hamburger icon, those 3 lines stacked up on each other. That's the main menu. So tap that on the top left of the screen. And then all these options come up. So the important one first is the preferences towards the bottom of the list. So I'll click preferences. And so now you need to basically set your preferences and connect this to your account online. So the most important part are these first 3 fields. So first, you need to select the jurisdiction where you're collecting data. For most of us, that'll be New York. If you were collecting records in Pennsylvania, you would select Pennsylvania. One thing I'll mention is that this app is only usable by participating jurisdictions. So if your state is not on this list, you will not be able to use the app like you can use the online website. But if anyone has questions about that, you can enter those into the chat box. For most of you, select New York. And then for username and password, you enter in the same email address and password that you use to create an IMAP account. And if you have not made an account yet, there is a helpful link underneath the password. There's that blue hyperlinked text that says create account or reset password. So if you clicked on that, it would take you out of the app and open up in your browser. So since I'm on an iPhone, it would open up in Safari and it'll have that login portal like Jen showed earlier. And you can create your account there. And once you're all set, you can come back into the app. But once you have your jurisdiction, username, and password typed in, it's really important to click this green button that says Retrieve IMAP Lists. So I'm going to click that. This is basically going to make a call to the website and make sure the username and password match to an account on IMAP. And it will also download the New York species list so that I can report species that are tracked in New York State. And if you're a part of any organizations or projects, this is how those get called into the app as well. And you should get this green success message. If you get a red error message, it might be because there's an issue with the username and password. So maybe make sure you can log in online and then try typing the username and password in again carefully within the app. So I'm going to press OK. One thing I'll note is that some iPhones, they might think you're typing in a sentence when you're typing in the password. So if you see a space, it might autofill a space after your password. So if you see that happen, make sure to delete that space because that will mess up your password. But once you've retrieved IMAP lists and have been successful, that's the most important thing. So you could just scroll down to the bottom and press save on the bottom left, and you'd be all set to go out into the field. But I am going to briefly touch on a couple things, a couple extra features that are not required but might be helpful. So you can select whether you want to see scientific names, common names, or both by tapping. I'm going to leave it on common species, so it's filled in blue. So my species list will appear as common species, the common names. And then there's this option for customized species list. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see this very long species. So you'll scroll down and you'll still be at the beginning of the alphabet. So there are hundreds of species. I know I'm not going to be looking for every single one of those species when I go out in the field. So I think it's useful to select a couple species that you expect to be surveying for so that you have a small, easy to look through list when you're reporting records. So right now I would suggest adding in spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven, but also in the Fs, we have a species called fake species. So this is a species we created in the database so that anyone can go in and test the app and report an observation to make sure it's working without worrying about messing up the data if they're just testing things out. So you can test away with fake species, and those get removed from the database periodically. So tap on fake species to make sure that's checked, and then go down to S for spotted lanternfly, make sure that's checked. Unless you're using scientific, then it would be in the L's for Lycorma. Spotted lanternfly. Make sure that's checked, and then tree of heaven, which for me will be in the T's. If you're using scientific names, it would be under Ailanthus. So I'll say, okay, I have my customized species list all set. And then there's some more options, some more preferences. Leaving them at default is usually fine. At the bottom, the last thing I'll mention are selecting default projects and organizations. So this is also optional, but if you are part of an organization in IMAP and you do invasive species surveys for that organization and you want all your records to be associated with the organization, you can, for instance, set a default organization. So I have a default organization set for my app, and that means I won't even have to worry about selecting it. It'll just be automatically selected when I am recording observations. So if you have changed any of those preferences, make sure you press save at the bottom left. And then you'll be back to the main screen. And so now I'll show you how to add an observation, and you can all follow along and report a fake species observation. So there's a green button at the top right, says add observation. I'll click that. And it'll bring you to this screen. And the first thing that you can do is take a photo. So I'm going to use that first button and it will take a photo. And if I was in the field, I would try to take a really nice photo that shows some identifying characteristics and it's focused, etc. And then if you already took a picture and you decided to make a IMAP record afterward, you can also use this select photo from library to pick out a picture you've already taken. And then next, you have to select the species. So right now I have custom species list enabled. If it was something that I didn't have on my custom list, I could always uncheck it and then I would have the full list, but it takes a long time to scroll through. So that's why I use the custom list. So I'll check that. And then I will go in and select the species. So we are going to do a fake species right now. So I select fake species. And then next you have to record species detected or species not detected. So most cases that'll be species detected, meaning that you found it. But if eventually you are doing some sort of formal survey or you've signed up for a grid for surveying for spotted lanternfly or tree of heaven, you might use this species not detected feature too. So that would be if you have surveyed for the species and did not find it. And then the date should be automatically captured, so you shouldn't have to change that. And then your location should be shown on that map. One thing I'll mention is that if you're out in the outside of connectivity, bad cell service, the map might be blank. That doesn't necessarily mean that your GPS is not working. So the way to really check is to look at that location field underneath the map. So at the top of the screen right now, you should see a nice long longitude latitude string. So for New York, that'll be something in the -70s with a bunch of numbers after the decimal point, comma, and then something in the 40s with a bunch of numbers after the decimal point. That means that your app is accessing your GPS location. If it says something like 00, that probably means that you have not enabled location services for the IMAP app, and you'll have to go into your settings and fix that. So you would close out of the IMAP app and go into your phone's actual settings and try to fix that. And we can help you with that after the webinar if you have any issues. So feel free to enter that into the chat box. And so that's like the most important part to make sure you have captured. So the photo, the species, whether or not it was detected, and the location. So if you want to just do quick records, you can just scroll down to the bottom and press save right there and be done. But there are some other options. So you can choose a organization or project. So my organization is set to default, so I don't have to worry about that. If you did a formal survey effort and you searched a certain area for 20 minutes or something, you could enter that in. And then you can fill in some more information about the distribution of the invasive species. So the approximate area that the invasive species covers. If you can also leave this blank, which I'll do, and also the distribution. So whether it was trace or all the way up to monoculture, for tree of heaven or even spotted lanternfly, linearly scattered might be what you see, since roads are such an important corridor for this species. But I'll leave it blank for now. So just scroll back up to the top. And then if there's anything else that you want to fill in, you can type a note out in the observation comments. But of course that can be left blank as well. And then always remember to press save on the bottom left here. And so now the record will appear as a yellow card on your screen. If I wanted to go back and edit it, there's a little pencil button. But this being on my main screen means that it's on my phone, it's not in the database. So we're going to want to upload this. So once you're back at home and have good internet connection, you can go back into the main menu on the top and upload. So the way you upload is by uploading selected. So you need to select this record. So I can either click out and check that box by tapping it, or I can click select all. So I'll click that, and now it's checked. And then go back into the main menu and select upload selected. And it will ask if I'm sure. And I'll say yes. And then it will load for a minute, and you should get a green success message. And all right, so it's uploaded, and it says visit IMAP3 online and log in to view your uploaded record. So you could log in like Jen was showing earlier and view the record on the online interface. But I'll just cancel it out for now. And what you should see at the end is a blank screen. So this is what you want to see. This means that the records, they have not disappeared. They have just left your phone and are now on the online database, which is the goal, so that it can be viewed by natural resource professionals, agency staff, citizen community scientists, etc. And that's everything I wanted to show on the app. I know we are just passing the end of the webinar. So Jen, if you want to pull up the slides again, I'll just wrap up really quick.
All right, Mitch, can you see my slides?
Yes, yes. So we did those 3 things. So now we can go to the next slide. I was just mentioning that you can go online after the webinar and play around with the interface and view the records you just submitted. I expect we might see a cluster of new fake species records in the Finger Lakes area. And so next slide. Just wanted to show you where you can find help resources. So you can go to NYIMapInvasives.org/training, and we have a self-guided training collection of training resources. And you can also sign up for upcoming webinars. And you can also email the IMAP help desk at imapinvasives@dec.ny.gov. And then next slide. So thank you so much for joining us. You can keep in touch or find more information using the email, the website, or following us on social media. So now we can answer any questions, or if Hillary wants to do any wrap up for the whole webinar before we get into that, we can do that now because the IMAP presentation is finished.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today talking about how to report, spotted lanternfly or invasive species in general, not just in the Finger Lakes region, but this is a huge resource for New York State and the states that participate in iMapInvasives. So it's really great that we get more participation, because the power of the program is when people use it. I know that for the grants that I write, I go right to iMapInvasives, and if it's not mapped, then I can't show the need for funding for these areas. So we really need to get people, utilizing these areas, even if it's just one organism that's your favorite organism to map. We'd rather have that data point than none. It looks like Jennifer has been able to address a lot of the questions that have come on the chat box. One of the questions is, will this program be posted as well? I will ask that the IMAP team send me this presentation as a PDF, and I can put this on the fingerlakesinvasives.org website. This whole presentation, including the first half, has been recorded, and it will be available on the fingerlakesinvasives.org website. I've put the link there in the chat box for the webinar series. Once this has finished recording, I will post that there next to the title of this webinar. We also have a webinar coming up on December 15th. We will have our Starry Stonewort project manager here at the Finger Lakes Institute discussing the Starry Stonewort Collaborative project. And the presentation is called Enhancing the Understanding of Starry Stonewort in the Great Lakes Basin. So if you follow that link, it'll take you to that presentation where you can register. Another webinar that you might be interested is in January, Protecting Rare Species from Invasives in the Finger Lakes, presented by Steve Young, the chief botanist for the New York Natural Heritage Program. I want to provide a little bit more time to see if anyone else has any questions. But if there are no more in the chat box, I want to thank all of our excellent presenters. You see here in the chat box that this has been a well-received webinar series, and I appreciate the time for everyone asking questions and participating. All of our emails will be in the chat box, or go to fingerlakesinvasives.org, or I've put my email address there and I can direct you to the proper source for information. Happy to help. We have trail surveys, we have macrophyte surveys. So if you give me your information, I'm happy to plug you in on all of our citizen science works. Thank you, everyone. I hope you had a great holiday last weekend, and this month of holidays. I hope that you enjoy. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you on December 15th.